become an effective leader of leaders. By becoming an effective leader, you build the mindset and the competencies required to set in motion the strategic vision to move from a local company to a global company. By becoming a leader of leaders, getting everyone in the company to adopt the mindset of being like a global manager, you can leverage a local company with the competencies of a global mindset, systematically and intuitively moving the organization to higher levels of performance into a local company operating in the global marketplace. Yes, we live in a world that tugs and pulls us towards a global community. Whether good or bad, whether we agree or not, it is an environment that is constantly changing. It's easy for us to look out and say, it's overwhelming. Yet the way out there begins in here and in your local communities. Be local, adopt the mindset of effective leaders, and become global. Thank you.
We will now continue with the second question and answer session, and our first question for this period comes from Mexico. Go ahead, please.
Buenos días.
Good morning. Our question is the following. If a leader who has a global vision can then have a global vision in its business, so a leader with local vision, can he have a global vision in his business?
If we're starting at the local level, thinking about developing a vision, and we are focused there, the local community, again, the local constituencies will probably have some influences which will drive us, if we listen carefully and we're open to what we want to do, to look at potentially more than the local area. However, let me put it this way. I would suggest that if the leader is focused locally and his vision is local, more than likely the company will continue to exist at that level. There's nothing wrong with that. We need companies to do that. They need to be very successful. Over time, however, as the company becomes more and more successful, it is a possibility, and probably will occur, that those influences will affect and the vision will start to expand. So I think both are very important, and I would not suggest one is more important than the other.
Great. Now we go back to Medellin for the next question. Go ahead, please.
Experiencing technical difficulties with the connection.
Okay, we have some technical difficulties with the connection, apparently. So let me ask you another question. Changing mindsets is not an easy task. How do we know when the practice of changing our mindset is actually working?
Okay, yes, that's a very difficult challenge for each of us. The most fundamental issue is to become aware of how we currently are thinking, so we can make different choices. And I think what we need to do is establish feedback mechanisms for ourselves that allow people and people primarily to give us input or feedback on whether or not they are seeing behaviors that have changed. Because if we continue to use our sane mindset, we will continue to use the same set of filters that only allow us X number of choices. And if we continue to make those same choices, our behaviors will reflect that. And so you would see a change in behavior. You'd also see a change in expression. People would be talking about things differently. And you would probably find yourself being a little bit uncomfortable. In any change, there is some tension or growth, and so we'd also find ourselves being a little bit uncomfortable. But I think the end result is getting a reflection of the thinking and the behaviors that people around us are experiencing.
Excellent. We have a question now from Sabina Scavilla. Go ahead, please.
Buenos días.
The question is the following. To have success in a global environment, what should we take into account to administer the uncertainty, and how should we make our decisions based on this uncertainty?
Okay, so there is a lot of uncertainty going into the global market, and greetings to my friends in Sabinas. We have to ultimately take calculated risks. And so ways of mitigating that are to use the scenario planning process or systems thinking process and define what it is we're attempting to accomplish. And by looking at the constituents that are within the context of what we're looking at, understanding some of the cultural issues, understanding some of the business issues, understanding the political issues, the environmental issues, whatever they happen to be, whatever we've defined, and whatever that particular context is, then look at that from different points of view and see where and how it fits into us achieving what we're attempting to accomplish from our vision point of view. So we have to take this data in. We have to be willing to listen and be open to contradictory views. We have to be able to look at things that seem like they're almost opposites, and in there look for patterns of connections, because it's through those patterns of connections, and as we explore this in our thinking and our scenario planning, that, and using intuition to do that, that we will find insights.
Patterns of connections, great. And for our next question, we go to Lima. Go ahead, please.
Is there a certain method or something that you could suggest to review the adequate organizational mentality and to achieve this self-consciousness that we need to achieve?
There are several instruments that various companies have. I think of one being the organizational cultural inventory that a group called Human Synergistics has. And so I think you can find those instruments probably at the local level in some of the countries that you live in. I think another thing too is setting up sort of a listening post, I'll call it. As you are thinking about these issues, be willing to go out and ask questions. I think one of the challenges that I find that people tend to have is that they rather than just go ask the people that are involved, they'll try to find other ways of or instruments or things to get that data. And so I would suggest just simply going and asking them. I had one of my clients just recently say, you know, one of the funny things is that you just come up with these simple solutions. And I said, well, it's just talking to people. And for some odd reason, we don't like to do that.
Exactly. Sinaloa, Mexico is providing our next question. Go ahead, please.
Sí, muchas gracias. Les habla su amigo Miguel Islas.
This is your friend Miguel Islas from Culiacán. And before I would like to congratulate the professor for his excellent video conference. I would like to say that we in Mexico have a serious problem with just bureaucracy in politics and in organizations itself. So my question is focused on the following point. What impact does current corruption have in traditional educational setting while trying to develop proper leadership in the global environment? Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, one of the key characteristics of a successful global entity, whether it be business or an educational institution or whatever, is that the thing that ties it together and the thing that will give it its identity are its values. And so companies are recognized around the world for their values. Now, if you're working in an environment where there is corruption, it becomes very difficult to remain true to your values. And I think and if we want to be successful globally, we absolutely must cling to our values, be very clear what they are, and have the people within our organizations know what they are. And I think it's through challenging corrupt groups, through having a strong set of values, that in fact you may have an opportunity to nudge them and move them off of their desire to continue to function in that world.
So let me continue with that thought. And what are some of the characteristics of that context? How do we define the context as we try to look at our values versus the values of another organization with which we're trying to establish a relationship?
So I think there are a couple of levels there. One is that, so the question we just heard was the context we're working in a context where there's corruption, and how do we move beyond that? Right. So, and one of the challenges is that context is always more powerful than anything that we can do. So this becomes very, very, very difficult challenge for us. And so I would say that recognizing that the elements that are within the context, so whether there's corruption, and if there's the desire to go global, recognizing where our people are and how they respond to that, and what are some of the limitations that they have placed on themselves, by putting that together and saying, within this context, what are some of the areas that we might explore? Now, they might only be small areas at first that you can leverage to move to the next level of performance. But it's being sensitive to what people are saying, being sensitive to what their beliefs are, being sensitive to the organization, what its own beliefs are, being sensitive to the clients that you're attempting to serve, and also recognizing that in all of those, the same values might exist, and yet we're not, as a group, leveraging them or expressing them in a way that takes care of maybe the corruption. So I would once again say, if we look at the whole context, look at all the piece parts, we might find that there's much more energy and much more of a drive to actually respond to this issue than we currently are willing to think about.
So businesses actually can reach out to government bureaucracies and examine each other's values.
Absolutely.
And see where they stand. And could you elaborate on that, and how do we go about actually reconciling the business government differences in values and understanding?
Well, I think one of the big challenges is that you need to develop relationships and trust if you're going to have any success in those areas. And as I suggested in the talk a little while ago, that one of them is our competency. The other is our empathy, our understanding of the people. And so I think what we need to do is open the conversations just with listening to the points of view, being able to understand the various elements that are driving them to behave in certain ways, the context that they exist in, and share with them your own views, your own beliefs, in the context in which you're coming from. Through developing those relationships, you can start getting understandings, and through the development of understanding, you develop common grounds, and slowly as the common ground continues to grow and gets more solid, you can define more success.
And it is important for us to keep track of all these conversations that we hold, redefine the context, redefine the examination of our value systems in order to reconcile not only government and bureaucracy, but also local and global contexts.
Absolutely, keeping all the contexts in line, so to speak. But again, I think the thing we learn at the local level is how to do this successfully, because at the local level there are so many multicultural elements that are entering, so many ways of experiencing the world and experiencing those values that we can then use that as leverage.
Wonderful. Thank you for your excellent questions, but we have run out of time. We hope that you have enjoyed participating once again in this exciting multilingual and multinational program. Before we go, we would like to invite our ITC associates to participate in the 8th annual meeting of network members, which will be held on January 14, 15, and 16 in San Diego, San Francisco, and Sacramento. For more information or to register, contact the ITC at info@itc-group.org. We also would like to inform you that the ITC's new book, Productivity with a Global Flair, is now available for purchase through the ITC website or directly from ITC for lot purchases of 30 or more copies, particularly for video conference participants interested in the annual series certificate or diploma. We invite you to participate in the 11th video conference for this year's series, Strategies for Competitive Performance, airing November 13, 2003, entitled Technology Acquisition and Negotiation. the key to competitive performance. For additional information on this video conference series, please consult your participants' manual, where you will find the dates and specific topics for each program. For more information, you may visit our website at itc-group.org. On behalf of all of us, I thank you for your ongoing participation and interest in this program. Thank you, and see you soon.